Translation for this verse and purport. Parishanta means being tired. Indriya, bodily, atma, mentally, aham, I. Tritparita, being thirsty. Vukshita, and hungry. Snatva, taking bath. Pitva, drinking water. Also, hriday, in the lake. Nadya, of a river. Upasprishta, being in contact with. Gata, got relief from. Shama, tiredness. Translation, thus traveling, this is Narada Muni, young Narada, I felt tired both bodily and mentally, and I was both thirsty and hungry. So I took bath in a river lake and also drank water. By contacting water, I got relief from my exhaustion. Prabhupada short purport. Traveling mendicant can meet the needs of the body, namely thirst and hunger, by the gifts of nature without being a beggar at the doors of the householders. The mendicant therefore does not go to the house of a householder to beg, but to enlighten him spiritually. Prabhupada. So, parishantendriyatmaham tritparito bhuvukshita snatva pita hriday nadya upasprishto gatashama. Pari, we discussed yesterday, means around. One of these days we discussed it. Pari means around. And shanta is tired, fatigued. So pari shanta, like really tired. It's completely tired. Indriya is senses or his body. Atma, and Prabhupada translates the mind. Aham, I. Tritparita, again pari. Ita means gone, so gone around. Trit, thirst. So Chitparito means just sort of overwhelmed by thirst, or just completely overtaken by thirst. Vuvukshita, hungry. Snatva, bathing. Pitva, drinking. Hriday, nadya, in a river lake. Upasprishto, by that contact. Gata shama, my fatigue is gone. So, Prabhupada in his purport here points out that young Narada got relief not by going around collecting donations and then setting himself up with a nice pantry, but simply by natural gifts. There's Krishna says in the Gita, Yadra cha labha santushta. One should be satisfied by labha, gain, which comes yadra cha, of its own accord. The essence of Krishna consciousness is to realize one's relationship with Krishna. The essence of Krishna consciousness is to be conscious of Krishna and to realize that we are part of Krishna. Mamayivam sajiva loke. It's interesting in the Bhagavad Gita, I think 15:7, is it? When Krishna says that the living being is eternally part of me, the eternal living being is part of me. He actually says mamayivangsha. Mamayiva means part of me alone. Part of me alone. We inevitably identify with something greater than ourselves because alone we are not really a sustainable enterprise. For example, I am not personally going to produce my own food today. We're traveling, so you either have to buy food or you have to, someone has to offer you food. I guess, getting very basic, we depend for our food, as Krishna says, in the rain. It has to rain. Crops have to grow or cows eat the crops and produce milk and so on. So Krishna says, Anat bhavanti bhutani parjanyat anasambhava in chapter 3, that food comes from rain. Food comes from rain. Without water, also, of course, water is the focus here in this verse. Without water, there's no food. And we do not have the power to create water. So we're really dependent. And even if it does rain and food does grow, we depend on so many other people. Modern, of course, I have to be careful what I say here because Tapa's here. And regarding food production, but most of us who are not organic farmers, to our shame, we depend on others. Just like here at Tapa Punja, he produces beautiful organic food, or for those of us who don't have the luxury of being by an organic farm, we have to buy food. And of course the food is in the market because some truck brought it there, and there's people working to put it on the shelves, and also without civil order, without police, it wouldn't be safe to go to a food source. If you look at societies where civil order breaks down for whatever reason, you can't get food. For example, in Venezuela right now, people go to the stores and there's no food on the shelves. I mean, there's just enough to stay alive, but you have medical supplies. People go to clinics or hospitals and there's no medical supplies because of an unusually bad government. So if there's a riot, under many circumstances, so if there's no food, so if you, even to eat, or for civil order to be safe, to find clothes that you can wear and so on, it requires the cooperation of so many people. And even if we have a self-sufficient, let's say we're entirely self-sufficient in terms of food, clothes, everything, then we depend upon civil order, because if civil order breaks down, people will just come in with guns or knives and just take it from us. And even, for example, consider probiotics. Bios, of course, in Greek means life. So probiotics means pro-life, things that promote life. And so there's life in our body. I mean, we're even dependent on the living beings that help us to digest, or all kinds of microorganisms that without which the body would die. Not to speak of trees putting out oxygen, and so on and so forth. So any way you slice the cake, we are very dependent on so many other living beings. We're dependent on political states, city-states, or countries, governments, armies, police, people that bring food to the market. And so, what I mean, and not only are we physically dependent, there's emotional dependence. For example, one of the most severe punishments, apart from actual capital punishment, but below capital punishment, one of the most severe punishments is, what do they call it? Solitary confinement. Solitary, just being forced to be alone, where you have no contact with other human beings. Of course, in the absence of a human, there's always your pet dog or cat. But let's say if one is truly alone, then emotionally won't make it. I'm sure, I mean, they have Twilight Zone episodes and dystopia movies where someone's the last man on earth or something and gradually goes mad. So, they even had a movie recently called, what was it, Martian or something? I mean, but there's all these movies where, let's say someone's lost in space, and there's many movies like this, it's a whole genre, and they just struggle to keep their sanity. So we have physical dependence, emotional dependence, and we even have intellectual dependence for those who are interested in such things. For example, you have to, what was that song by the Jefferson Airplane, at the end of the song, Feed Your Head? That was the White Rabbit. But the last line was Feed Your Head. So, I mean, there's some truth in that. There's some, what's that?
That's what the Dormouse said.
Yes, that's what the Dormouse said, Feed Your Head. So, I know those who are intellectually inclined and sort of live in a world of ideas and knowledge, I mean, to be deprived of books, to be deprived of learning can be depressing. And it can be exhilarating to again have the opportunity to learn. And of course we learned because so many great souls, or merely clever writers, produced various kinds of knowledge or ideas or literature and so on. And so, I mean, the obvious conclusion here is that we are tiny souls. We are tiny souls, and we are very much dependent. So, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, so therefore we have this irrepressible tendency, psychologically, emotionally, to identify with something. Like, for example, I'm part of this family. That becomes very strong attachment. One clings to a certain family identification, or part of a certain community. I mean, I know people that, for example, came to America from another country and have been here for years and years, but they still talk about my country. And so people cling to this family identity. They not only cling to it, it's more than clinging. It's family identity, national identity, ethnic identity, religious identity. It becomes the whole foundation of their normal, waking, sane life. Their sanity, their emotional stability is based on this. It's sort of an unspoken, unthought of, but just constant foundation, of the false ego. But if you think about it, one's sanity in this world, one's ability to function in this world rests on a sense of knowing who you are. I mean, if someone suddenly was thrown into a state of utter confusion where they actually couldn't remember, couldn't understand who they were, who they belonged to, or it'd be quite traumatic. It's interesting in Sanskrit, when people meet each other, like a typical greeting would be, for example, if a man meets a woman, or if a man meets a man, a woman meets a woman, they'll say something like, Kosi kasyasi. Kosi means, who are you? And kasyasi, whose are you? Whose are you? In other words, to whom do you belong? Because you must belong to some family, to some community, kingdom, something. A varna, an ashram. People have to belong to someone, or to something. So it's in this context where we are, as living beings, we are at the same time private and public. We are not merely private, we are both private and public. We are individual and we are social. We're both. And this is part of, by the way, this is part of Veda. It is a good tip for your future career in psychology. It's a question of keeping this balance. If someone becomes too private and cannot really interact with the public, it becomes, it's actually some kind of emotional imbalance, where someone's unable to, or someone's merely individual with no sense of social responsibility, no sense of belonging. Or the opposite, if one is simply public and social and has no inner self, no private life, no sense of individual integrity. I mean, you can see this even in a, let's say, relationship between a man and a woman. If they're if they lose their individuality and just sort of merge into this blob, it's called codependence, where they lose their sense of individual integrity, of individual strength. On the other hand, if they're merely individual and there's no real union, in a serious sense of the word, then it's not a couple, it's not really a relationship, or not a very serious one. So it's this Veda. But because of where we are one, we are individual, we are different from other people, we are separate from other people, physically, and spatially, and in terms of consciousness, we are individuals. At the same time, we are part of groups. And being part of a group is also who we are. It's also who we are. So that's why Krishna emphasizes mamaiva, that ultimately you are part of me alone. I'm part of a family or a community or a society, a state, or this or that, a country, but ultimately, Krishna says, you are really just part of me. And everything else that we're part of depends on that. In other words, the only reason that, take for example when parents have children. I mean, we take it for granted that parents have children and they love their children if they're emotionally healthy and morally healthy. Then they love their children. But why? It's not automatic. I mean, for example, among lions, the male lion, out of jealousy, you see the male ego is not only in human beings. So male lions will often kill their own cubs because they don't want competition. So they see the lioness giving all this attention to the cubs, so they just kill the cubs. I mean, not all of them, obviously, there wouldn't be any more lions, but it is it happens, and it's not so rare. So the fact that, I mean, Marvin Gaye, he was a famous singer. You remember Marvin Gaye? Raise your hand if you're old. So his father killed him. He was a very successful, very famous Motown singer, and he got in a fight with his father, and his father shot him to death. I mean, his father regretted afterwards, but so the love that parents feel for children, children for parents, husband and wife, brothers, sisters, cousins, nephews, friends, you name it. It actually comes from Krishna. It actually comes from Krishna. It's because we are part of Krishna that we have the capacity to love. And in a sense, the capacity to receive love, because some people can't receive love. I mean, some people just have disturbed lives in various ways, and people can try to help them. They can't take help. They can't take love. They just can't accept it. They don't know how to accept it. And so I remember actually I had a powerful experience the day my father passed away, which was about 16 and a half years ago. And we were a close family. I had a very good father. So I remember lying in bed that night and just thinking about it. And the realization I had was that in experiencing the love of my parents, because for an infant, the love of the parents is really what kind of brings you into the world and situates you in the world. And I realized that experiencing the love of my parents was my first stage of God consciousness. Because parental love comes from Krishna. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Pitaham asya jagato, Pita aham, I'm the father, asya jagato, of this universe, Mata, I'm the mother. Krishna is also the mother. So the mother's love, the father's love comes from Krishna, and Krishna invests that love in a human mother or father, and empowers that father or mother to love their child. And also because we are part of Krishna, it's natural for us to do so. In a sense, it's that endowment from Krishna really is eternal. It's always in us because we're part of Krishna. We're qualitatively one with Krishna, even as we're quantitatively different. So the power, the ability to form friendship, loving friendship, and love between man and woman obviously comes from Krishna, Radha and Krishna. Parental love, the love of their filial love, the love of children for their parents, all these things come from Krishna. And if you think about it, it's through these relationships, like you love your country, you love your family, that you get a sense of belonging. If someone has absolutely no affection for their country, like zero, they're not going to feel part of it. In fact, that's what it means to be alienated. To be alienated, to be estranged. You become a stranger to your own family or a stranger in your own country or whatever, when one has no more capacity to really feel a loving connection. And so the whole world of psychology, the whole world of human psychology really is based on Krishna, based on God. And to the extent that we are alienated from God, to that extent our own consciousness becomes troublesome. our own psychology, to the extent that we are estranged from that primary relationship. So Krishna says, Mamaiva Angsha Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, the eternal living being, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. The eternal living being is part of me alone. Interesting. Part of me alone. Krishna, there's many verses in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna emphasizes, Krishna's not denying the validity of other relationships. In fact, Krishna appeals to Arjuna's other relationships in chapter 2 of the Gita, saying, if you don't fight, a lot of people are going to think you're really a nut. You're a coward, you're this, you're that. And so Krishna actually appeals to Arjuna's other relationships. But so what does Krishna mean when he says, Mama Ivang Sachi, the word Eva, alone? The living, eternal living being is part of me alone. Where Krishna says in chapter 18, Tamaiva Sharanam Gacha, go to him alone for shelter, meaning the Lord. Or when Krishna says, for example, Sarva Dharman Parityaja Mam Ekam Sharanam Braja. Krishna, what does that really mean? Because Krishna says Sarva Dharman, all varieties of religion, it doesn't mean like give up Christianity and Judaism and all. It's because Dharma in the context of the Bhagavad Gita doesn't mean an institutional religion. Dharma, we look and see how is the word Dharma used in Bhagavad Gita, because Krishna is saying giving up all Dharma. So what does Krishna mean when he says Dharma? For one thing, Dharma means justice. Dharma is the word for justice. So obviously, in a spiritual society should be the model for justice, not the model for injustice. But for example, Krishna says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata, that whenever dharma is collapsing, and abhutanam, each word is so interesting. Tana is just an abbreviation of sthana, which we have in English, standing status. So then ut is up, uttana, which literally means standing up, like an uprising. And avi means sort of aggressive. So an aggressive uprising of adharma, abhutanam, adharmasya. Tadatmanam sujami aham, and then Krishna says, dharma samstapanartaya. Krishna comes to this world to establish or re-establish dharma. So why would Krishna say, give up all dharma, if he comes to this world to establish it? That, I think, is a good question. Why would Krishna tell you to reject the very thing he comes to this world to establish? And why would Krishna appeal to Arjuna and say that you have to fight because it's your dharma? If Krishna says give up all dharma, Arjuna's got a perfect excuse to leave the battlefield. Because after all, it's Kshatriya dharma, but I'm giving up all dharma, so see you later. I'll watch the battle on cable news.
Yeah, but he's telling them just to surrender to him, and he's telling them to fight.
True, but he is saying also that he comes to this world to establish dharma.
Mm-hmm.
And he is telling Arjuna that he has to fight because it's his dharma. Krishna does tell him that. So I won't keep you in suspense any longer. And we're going to pass around a little donation box, and as soon as I'm satisfied, I will give you the answer. Anyway, to understand this verse, you have to understand that Krishna is contrasting two words, which are sarva, dharma, and ekam, all in one. And obviously, the opposite. So, what Krishna is actually saying here, sarva dharma parityaja, he's saying, come to me alone for shelter. In other words, we have to give up all dharmas as shelter. Your kshatriya dharma, or your dharma as a householder, or as a sannyasi, is not going to save you. Only Krishna can save us. And so that's why Krishna says, Tameva Sharanam. Krishna says, Mam Ekam Sharanam Braja. Come to me. Eka in Sanskrit means one, but it also means alone. Like if you think of the word alone, it's just all one. The word one is in the word alone. And so we have to do these things, but they're not our ultimate shelter. Krishna is the only shelter, so give up dharma as shelter. Now, if you look at it, consider, for example, the karma mimamsa philosophy, that if you just perform your ritual duties, then actually in the karma mimamsa shastras or textbooks or their books, the gods or the supreme god are just sort of like paraphernalia. Just like in order to properly perform a ritual, let's say you have to offer ghee into the fire. So the ghee is paraphernalia, or the fire is paraphernalia. So the gods are just paraphernalia. It's like, let's say you go to get a driver's license and you complete all the requirements, you pass the test and so on. The worker behind the counter has to give you a driver's license. The public servant can't say, well, you did pass the driving test and the written test and all that, but I don't think you love me. Therefore, you can't have a driver's license. Does that happen in New Orleans? No. Not even in Canada. So,
Might happen in India.
show your love by putting the money down on the counter. So that's the karma mimamsa picture of how you get to heaven. You just perform the rituals. If you do it right, you get to heaven. The cosmic bureaucrats have no discretionary power. They must give you your ticket to Swarga, your ticket to heaven. Now, if Dharma by itself could save you, then the karma mimamsa people would be right. In fact, just as there's a Brahma Sutra or Vedanta Sutra that begins a Tato Brahma Jigyasa, now let us try to understand the absolute. The Mimamsa Sutra, they have a sutra, by the way, and it begins the Tato Dharma Jigyasa. Now let us try to understand the ritual or the Dharma or the rules. And so what Krishna is saying, Krishna in a sense in Sarva Dharman, he's rejecting karma mimamsa philosophy. He's saying dharma alone is necessary but not sufficient. It will not save you. By itself, you actually have to come to me alone for shelter. So, and also the Bhagavatam. There are verses that say that, what is that verse that Dharma swanushtita pungsam? Yes. Dharma, well performed or well practiced. Dharma swanushtita pungsam vishwaksena katha sujat nopada yejadiratin. But if, even though you performed your Dharma well, you don't develop attachment or attraction to Krishna. You don't want to hear about Krishna. Like, I don't want to hear about Krishna. I did my duty. Vishwaksena katha sujat nopada yejadiratin shrama eva hikevam. It's nothing but shrama. Just labor. You just knocked yourself out for nothing. So if you think about it, these four goals of human life, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So dharma, when Krishna says sarva dharman parityaja, mam ekam, so in other words, give up all dharmas as your ultimate shelter, as your ultimate goal of life. There's a tendency in this world for people to think, I did my duty, I'm a good person, it's enough. In fact, that's what most people think nowadays. Most people, say in this country, do not believe there's any particular need to develop devotion to God. I'm a good person, I take care of my family, I pay my taxes. In other words, I do my dharma. And that makes me a good person, that gives me a good life. And if there is a heaven, I'll go there because I was a good person. Isn't that kind of what everyone thinks?
Yes.
So Krishna's saying, think again, or don't think again. Anyway. So that's what Krishna's saying. That's what Krishna's saying. That no, you have to come to me alone for shelter. Shelter. I mean, what is shelter? Shelter means a place where you really find relief and protection from serious trouble. For example, Krishna says in chapter 9 of the Gita that if you, what is that? Trividya, somapa, putapapa, swargating partayante. That soma drinkers, of course Aldous Huxley got this for his Brave New World, but pa means drinkers, those who drink soma. And of course soma is only obtained through strict and elaborate Vedic sacrifices. So if someone's drinking soma, that means they did the sacrifice. In other words, they follow their Vaidika dharma, their Vedic duty. So soma pa, puta papa, obviously there's all kinds of poetic alliterations going on here. So soma pa, puta papa means purify their sins. They drank the soma, they are purified of their sins. Soma pa, trividya, and they're trividya. Trividya means the ones who know the three Vedas, the Rig, Yajur, and Sama Vedas. There are 4 Vedas, but often you'll find 3 because the 4th Veda, the Atharva Veda, was kind of the voodoo Veda, in the sense that it has all like spells you can put on people, and you can put curses on people, and so the high-class Brahmins stayed away from it a little bit. That was the Atharva Veda, and that's why you hear, so Trividya, those who know the 3, those who have, and Vidya in a sense like scientific knowledge, those who really understand the 3 Vedas. Trividya somapa, drinking the soma, which means they did the sacrifice properly. Putapapa, freed of their sins. Swargalokam prartayanti, they aspire to Swargaloka. Trividya somapa, putapapa, Swargati, the destination, next stop, Swarga. They aspire to that. Swargati prartiyante, but then te punyama sadhya surendra lokam asnanti divyan divideva bhogan, and what are just, we have a Gita here that okay, te punyama sadhya, having reached, thank you, having reached Punyama Surendra Loka, the world of Surendra, the Lord of the gods, is Indra, which is Punya, which is sort of a pious world. Asnanti Divyan Divideva Bhogan, in heaven they enjoy the delights of the gods. Asnanti Divyan Divideva Bhogan. They enjoy the enjoyments, the pleasures, the divine pleasures of the divine beings, of the gods. But then kshine punye, but when that punya is used up, martya loka vishanti, they enter again what's called the mortal world. I mean, you die everywhere in the universe, but these worlds that we live in are especially called mortal world because there's just so much death. I mean, people are dying just all the time. I mean, in the heavenly worlds, they don't need a daily obituary column because people live for a very long time. But in this world, there's just death everywhere, and not only human death, but insects, all kinds of creatures. They're just dying all over the place, and so therefore, this world is called Martya Loka. So then, kshine puts, when it's like, let's say you go on vacation and you're staying in a really beautiful hotel, but when your credit card is used up, they'll throw you out. I mean, it's a very obvious point. Because punya, your piety, that's your, that's the currency in the, I don't know, you call them 108-star hotels up in heaven. And kshine means used up. So in that kshine punye martya lokam vishanti evam trayi dharmam anuprapanna. This is very interesting because anuprapanna, or prapanna, is the, as you know, past passive participle of the verb prapad, which is the same verse used for surrender, as in surrender to Krishna. Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan mam prapadyate. So prapadyate, after many births, one in knowledge surrenders to me. The word surrender is prapadyate, and then just the past passive participle, prapanna, means surrender. So thus, having surrendered to the wrong guys, or the wrong process. Evam trayi dharma, they, and anu prapanna. Anu means following. Anyone here know Spanish? Yeah, it's just like in Spanish they say seguidamente. Seguir means to follow, and seguidamente means like constantly, like one after the other. And so it's in Sanskrit similar like that. So anu means following, but it can also mean in the sense of one after the other. In other words, steadily or constantly. And so here, anuprapanna, they surrender to trayi dharma. Trayi, again, the three Vedas. You've seen that word before. So they surrender to the dharma, the karma kanda dharma of the three Vedas. Just one. There it is. So, actually, I left out one line. Te tang bhutva swargalokam vishalam. Te, they, tang bhutva, having enjoyed that, swargalokam, having enjoyed that heavenly world, which is vishalam, which is just immense. Having enjoyed that immense heavenly world, kshine pune, when their pious capital is exhausted, all their heavenly credit cards are maxed out, then martyalokam vishanti, they come back to this mortal world, and evam, thus. So here's the conclusion. Or thus, or therefore. Just like in English, same in Sanskrit, the word thus or therefore concludes something. If you say in English thus, it means you just said something earlier, and now there's an obvious conclusion, or you're going to get the conclusion of what you said before. So it's the same in Sanskrit. Evam, thus, trayi dharma manuprapanna, thus having surrendered to, having steadily surrendered to this dharma of the karma kanda three Vedas, gadagatam, they just got a round trip. They went up and they came. Gata means they went, and agata means they came back. Gadagatam kama kama lavante. They achieve simply going and coming back. And they are called here kama kama, which is interesting. Why the repetition of the words? Because as in English, the word, for example, wish or desire, which is kama, can be used both as a noun or a verb. So, for example, you can say, I wish for my wishes. I wish is a verb, and my wishes, wishes is a noun. So I wish for my wishes. I desire to achieve my desires. So, same thing in Sanskrit, desire or wish can be a verb and a noun. And so Krishna kind of plays on that here and says, he calls these people kama kama, those who wish for their wishes. I mean, what else do you wish for? Well, you can wish for Krishna's wishes. Mm-hmm. You can desire Krishna's desires. And that's what you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. So these people, instead of wishing for Krishna's wishes or desiring Krishna's desires, they wanted their own. And therefore, they ultimately strike out. Sorry, the ride's over. It's like you buy a ticket in the amusement park, you go on the ride's over, you got to get off. You don't get off, policemen will come and throw you off. That's just, the way the world is. So, that's so much for Dharma. So, in a sense, it's also that Dharma. So, if we look at Bhagavad Gita, that's, Krishna says that these people, these karma-kandi people, they, instead of surrendering to Krishna, they surrender to Dharma, a particular dharma, trayi dharma, the dharma of the three, and the three being the three primary karma kanda Vedas, the Rig, Yajur, and Samaveda. So that's the dharma Krishna said you have to give up also. So even if we take sarva dharman to mean there are some dharmas you just really have to let go of. Not just for shelter, but just let go. That's the dharma Krishna's talking about. So again, that's what I try to do in my Gita guide, and now at this point I officially begin my infomercial. Just kidding. But what I tried to do in the Gita guide is show you how each Sanskrit word that Krishna uses, how he uses it, and what Krishna means by different words, by showing how he uses them. And here's just a little example of it. Krishna says sarva dharman parityaja. So what does Krishna mean by dharma? And what doesn't he mean? For example, Krishna, that famous verse in chapter 2 of the Gita, neha vikramanashosti pratyavayo navidyate swalpamapi asya dharmasya chayate mahato vayat. Krishna says that in this process of bhakti yoga, there's no loss or diminution. So whatever you, like, take the case of Ajamila. Ajamila became an advanced Vaishnava, then he fell down, became attracted to a prostitute, and actually married her, which, what was he thinking? So, but then at the end, when he called out Narayan, he wasn't liberated, but he was restored to his highest point of spiritual advancement. And that's what Krishna says, neha vikramanashosti, there's no loss or pratyavaya or diminution. So, Ajamila, not Ajamil. Ajamil is a Vedic breakfast cereal. Ajamil. But Ajamila is the person. So, he was restored to his highest point of spirit. And that will happen with us. I mean, we all know we have our high points and lower points. And, we have our brilliant moments when we feel real devotion and we really see the sublime beauty of Krishna's creation, and we have nothing but love in our hearts, and then we have our other days. So the beauty of Krishna consciousness is that your highest point of spiritual attainment, it's like in pro football.
Another commercial.
It's like in pro football. Okay. In pro football, what they do, you know the rule. I'll have to explain it to Vedanta because he has no idea about sports. But when they get toward the end zone, if they could just even hold the ball over the goal line, right? So it's like that, or like in. It's a touchdown, or for example, it's like the farthest point of forward motion. Because let's say the runner's carrying the ball and he reaches a certain point, and then the other team comes and they can push him back 50 yards. But isn't it the furthest point of forward motion?
Yeah.
That's where the ball goes. And so it's something like that in Krishna consciousness. There are obvious analogies between Krishna consciousness and professional football. So in your spiritual practice, it's like your farthest point of forward motion in your spiritual advancement. The farthest point you got to, that's yours forever. It's marked, and then you go back, and that's what happened to Jamila. But then Krishna says, after having explained that about Bhakti Yoga, how it no loss or diminution, then he says, Sualpam api, literally even very little. Su means very, and alpa is little, and api means even. So even very little. Sualpam api asya dharmasya, of this dharma. It's interesting because in the Gita, Krishna mentions dharma here and there, but when he wants to focus on Krishna consciousness, then he says this dharma. I mean, not just dharma, but this dharma. So sualpam api asya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat, saves one from the great danger, literally. Bhaya in Sanskrit means both danger and the emotion it arouses, which is fear. Fear is a product of danger. So the word bhaya can mean both danger itself and also our emotional response to danger. So when Krishna says it saves one from, you could say the great fear or the great danger. The great danger. So that's a word. That's an example how when we read a verse like Sarva Dharma Pratyajya, we have to actually look and see how the word dharma is used in the Gita. What's Krishna really talking about? So, and then of course in the Bhagavatam verse we did Narada Muni. Just to go back to that for a moment to wrap up the class, so you can't say he didn't speak on the verse. Nice class, but you didn't talk about the verse. So it prevents you from saying that. Well, if I can find the verse. Yes. Parishantendriyatmaham Sriparito Vukshita Snatva Pipa Hade Nadya Upasprishota Prasama. So Narada Muni is now preparing for God realization. He's traveled around, he's seen the world, he's seen enough. He understands now what planet he's on. And not only does he understand this planet, but he just understands the universal laws of nature, because you can extrapolate. In other words, you've seen one planet, you've seen them all, in a sense. Because even though other planets may be worse or better than this planet, but there are certain universal laws. Just like, for example, in material science, they believe and teach that there are universal laws that apply everywhere in the universe. And so there are spiritual laws, so whether you're on this or that planet, it's a material world, and there are certain universal features of every planet which indicate that we shouldn't be here. There's just, the Prabhupada gave a great example. If you're in prison, you may have a good cell, or maybe you work in a warden's library or something, really nice job, but you're still in prison. So Narada now is going to begin his meditation, and he's actually going to see Krishna. So any questions on these points? Yes, Yogi Ji. We have a bona fide yogi here.
I was wondering, Maharaj, your take on modern psychology, where God would not be in the center. The Christians always seem to pick on that in psychology.
Yeah.
God is sort of left out the picture.
Not really. Okay, here are a few points on psychology. First of all, in Prabhupada's purport to the Bhagavatam 1.5.22, that verse, Idangi Pungsasta Prasachita Siva, Prabhupada says that all these human sciences, whether they're material sciences or they're human sciences, should be used in Krishna consciousness, and that humans, actually I'll read it to you. I have the first canto here. Yes. I'll read you what Prabhupada says, and then I'll talk about just the actual state of modern psychology.
Fifth chapter.
Yeah, 1.5.22. Prabhupada says, human intellect is developed for advancement of learning, not just in Shastra, in art, science, philosophy, physics, chemistry, psychology, economics, politics, etc. By culture of such knowledge, the human society can attain perfection of life. Obviously, a society that has a really good educational system is going to be a much better society than ignorant society. For all its piety, India does not have a comprehensive, good comprehensive educational system, and there's just unlimited corruption. There's also a lot of corruption in this country, but India is kind of gold medalist in that.
They don't have good academic institutions. You see all those little kids walking to school in nice dress.
Well, they have, for some people have good schools, but it's not, for everyone. There's a lot of people that don't get a good education. But then Prabhupada says, this perfection of life culminates in the realization of the Supreme Being Vishnu. And then Prabhupada says, when advancement of knowledge is applied in the service of the Lord, the whole process becomes absolute, which is the thing that the Christians were saying. Therefore, all the sages and devotees of the Lord have recommended that the subject matter of art, science, philosophy, physics, chemistry, psychology, and all other branches of knowledge should be wholly and solely applied in the service of the Lord. Art, literature, poetry, painting, etc. may be used for glorifying the Lord. So Prabhupada, and so you have some, we have some Manichaean Vaishnavas. The Manichaeans, that was a group back, classical times that thought the world is evil, and therefore you just reject the world because it's evil, and that kind of stuff. So Prabhupada is not saying that psychology is Maya, education is Maya, all the universities are merely slaughterhouses and nothing else. It's not what Prabhupada is teaching, if you look at everything he says. So what about modern psychology? First of all, modern psychology is extremely diverse. There are many, many kinds of psychology. It's very diverse. And among many psychologists, not all of them, but many of them, or maybe say many psychologists recognize the power of using people's faith, whatever it may be, as part of the healing process. In fact, studies show that people that do have faith do better medically and psychologically. They actually often respond better to medical treatment or to psychology. So I would say that in many areas of psychology, there's a recognition that you don't reject someone's religious faith. You actually use it as part of the solution. I mean, he said, Prabhupada himself, one time a devotee asked, this is Veda-based devotee asked Prabhupada, what if a devotee seems to have some kind of emotional problems or mental problems? Prabhupada said, well, your body's sick, you go to the body doctor. When your mind's sick, you go to the mind doctor. So psychology is evil or is like the anti-Christ, or I think that's quite a stretch. Now, in fairness to the Christians, Freud, who in a sense, as you could say, is the father of modern psychology, although his own theories now are not in any way the Bible. Freud was a bitter atheist. I mean, he was a real jerk about those things. In fact, I remember when I was at Harvard, I met this professor, who I think was at Boston College, which is, same area, Boston area. And he was, I think, he was a Jesuit. He was a scholar, a serious scholar. What he'd done is, he showed that if you study Freud's own definitions and descriptions of psychopathology, then you can prove that Freud's attitude toward religion was pathological. Freud's attitude toward religion matches his own definition of mental illness. And so, but then again, after Freud, you get, of course, Carl Jung, who had a very different view. And was really interested in all kinds of metaphysical ideas and thought it was really the key. And so, to characterize psychology in general, or psychology for the most part, is anti-religion, I think is, inaccurate. Yeah?
Are there Sanskrit words describing mental illness and disturbance of the mental psyche in the Vedic days? How did they treat mental?
Well, Arjuna, right in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna was having a breakdown right there in chapter 1. Right. His mind is reeling. He can't maintains mental equilibrium. Actually, there's two places in the Gita where Arjuna is described as, or described himself as, having serious mental problems. One is in the end of chapter 1, and then another part is in, of course, chapter 11. When he sees universal form, it really he just starts to unravel. It's interesting because what Arjuna says is, Nalavecha Shar, what is it? Disho na jane. This is really it, which literally means, I do not know the directions. I mean, if you think about it, your sense of just up and down and sideways and just, what if you suddenly lose that? You actually don't know up or down or sideways. It's really, you're really in a very difficult mental condition. And that's what Arjuna says. He says, Disho na jane, I don't know the directions anymore. Nalavecha Sharma, I can't find any mental equilibrium or peace. In other words, mind is just, and also in the Bhagavatam. Actually, I think in that same, maybe chapter 5 of the first canto, where Narada Muni talks about people who, just like a boat is being blown by the wind at sea and can't find any place to stop. It's just, imagine a little boat, because they didn't have, big boats back then. So imagine a little boat just being tossed and thrown by a storm. And Narada says that's like the mental condition of someone who has no devotion. Back there? Yes.
Like in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is preaching to Arjuna and saying, do thou duty, this is without considering happiness and all that. So if you're going to ultimately reach the goal, if a person's just doing like thinking, okay, I'm a good person, and they're doing their so-called duty in life, will they attain a higher? Will they ultimately reach Krishna? Like maybe in a slower process?
Well, they will. That's the mode of goodness. Krishna often in the Gita talks about the mode of goodness as just doing your duty. Like, for example, when it comes to charity, the person in goodness is thinking, Dattavyamiti jadanam diyate hinupakarini. In charity, the mode of goodness, the person is thinking, it's just the right thing to do. It's just my duty to give this charity. And the charity is given to someone who's not going to give you anything in return. You're not going to get your name on a building somewhere. In a university, you're not going to get your name in the newspapers. You're just giving it because it's the right thing to do. As far as leading to Krishna, maybe. I mean, what we know is that the mode of goodness is favorable for Krishna consciousness because Krishna says from goodness comes knowledge. So in the mode of goodness, your mind starts to clear up. Although Krishna also says those in goodness worship the demigods. Yajante Satvika Devan, chapter 14. So the example I give is mode of goodness is like the airport. If you want to take a flight, if you want to travel, you need to go to the airport. But if you go to the airport and miss your flight, you might as well stay home. So if you go to the mode of goodness and don't understand Krishna, you miss your flight. So you're no closer to your destination than someone who never went to the airport. Yes?
Many years ago, I heard part of a tape, a class that you were giving, in which you were describing that physical geography is a reflection of karma. For example, desert versus temperate. Can you speak on that at all?
Well, of course, some people love the desert. I mean, some people voluntarily move to Arizona. Anyway, I don't want to. Better be careful what I say because I have to visit Arizona on this trip and tell people how wonderful it is. But, I mean, everyone has their taste. Some people like the desert. Personally, I prefer green, rivers and green and all that. But, yeah, the physical place, I mean, to live in a place where, I mean, because the earth has modes. It's not just like nature is beautiful. I mean, frankly, there's some places that are really not beautiful. They're kind of, and you can feel it, the modes, isn't it? I mean, different.
But is that the result of people doing sinful things there, and therefore there's kind of, so to speak, a curse?
It could be, or it could just be the variety of the world. There's just, Krishna creates all this variety so he can, put everybody where they're supposed to be.
Because we sometimes say there's individual karma, but there's also collective karma.
I don't say it very often. I mean, I know some people say it's not something I say very much. I'm really into individual responsibility. I don't really believe that some innocent person is punished because they were just born in the wrong group or just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. What Krishna says in the Bhagavad, Krishna doesn't talk about collective karma in the Bhagavad Gita. He just talks about individual responsibility. So that's how I see it. Vedanta Kriti.
Maharaj, the story of the illiterate Brahmin who attained such a high consciousness, can you explain how he attained that in comparison to how we're trying to attain?
Well, the illiterate Brahmin was not unlearned. He heard about Krishna. He knew about Krishna. So he wasn't a scholar, he was illiterate, but he certainly knew Krishna's pastimes. He knew what Krishna told Arjuna. He knew Mahabharata. So I think that's that. In other words, he's not an ignorant Brahmin, he's just illiterate. So, thank you all very much. And
There's one question.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Maharaj, this is a question about Sanskrit pronunciation. I understand that when the H with a dot comes, you pronounce it at the end of each line. And but supposing we are reading some book, like yesterday we were reading The Nectar of Instruction, and Srila Prabhupada just gives part of the quote, like, Sangat, something, something.
Sagjayate Kama.
Kama, yeah. So in that case, do you pronounce the H with Kamaha, or you just say Kama? It's just part of the shloka in the middle of the text.
I think it's your choice. Personally, I will now, since I, somehow believe it's my duty to be controversial in every aspect of my life, even in grammar, I think that I'm not sure that, we're taught that it's like Vishnuhu or Harihi and Krishnaha, for the H with the dot. I'm not sure people actually did that in the middle of lines because for the following reason. If we look at the Vedas and Sanskrit literature in general, they were very, very serious about meter. For example, sloka. Sloka is 4 8-syllable lines. And sloka, the word sloka is kind of like Kleenex or Xerox in the sense it's a product that became so popular that it stands for everything in that category. And so technically a sloka is just one kind of meter. But because that's the most common meter found in important literature, it just came to mean a verse in general. But a sloka is 4 8-syllable lines, technically. As in Dharma Kshetre, Kuru Kshetre, Samaveta, Yuyutsava, and so on. So, because Sanskrit literature, the composition is very sophisticated, it's very advanced, it's very intelligent, and meter is very important. Having the right number of syllables in each line in the right order. And if you say Vishnuhu, it actually changes the meter. And so what I suspect, it's just like on phonological grounds, I think one could make a very strong argument that the Sanskrit V was originally pronounced as a W, which we still do, like in, for example, Swami. The V is pronounced like a W. Of course, in East India, they pronounce it like a B. In fact, in the Bengali alphabet, there are no separate letters, V and B, it's the same letter. So they say Bandeham or Brindavan. But anyway, that's phonetics. So, yeah, don't worry about it, just think of Krishna and I'm sure it'll all work out. So, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to visit New Talavan. see so many old friends, meet some new friends. Hare Krishna.
We apologize that the basket didn't get very full, you know.
I take promissory notes credit.
Okay.